Hello friends, this is the Cryptonian taking a look at the market once again. Today is Monday. Not much of a move for Bitcoin at all. We're pretty much in slow motion here, right here, and we've covered this in a previous video. So what I'm looking at today, what I want to share with you today is a little bit different. It's a little bit different because there's a correlation going on that you need to be aware of. And this correlation is with none other than the Nasdaq. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Nasdaq. Nasdaq is not even crypto, right? Why would the Nasdaq mean anything? Well, and the point is this, that the Nasdaq affects Bitcoin because Bitcoin is considered or trades like a tech stock. Think about it. It's technology, and the market doesn't really know what to do with Bitcoin because, is Bitcoin a currency? Is it a technology? Is it a store of value? Is it a commodity? It's a little bit of everything, right? So the only way that the market really knows how to classify Bitcoin is with technology, and Nasdaq is technology heavy. So that being said, we need to take a look at the Nasdaq 100 index. The NDX is what we have on the screen for you today. And when we take a look at the Nasdaq, we can see that right here we are up against a long-term resistance level. And what I mean by that is when you change the perspective here, you can see that there's a big, huge rejection point here, right? At 16,580 for the Nasdaq. And then that was the beginning of the major pullback. We are currently close to that area once again. Now, we didn't reach it, but we were very close, and then we had a pullback. And then we pushed back up again close to that area, and now we're seeing another red day. So we need to be careful here. And the reason is it's not just visually. Here I have what's called the Cryptonian correlation tool. And when we take a look at Bitcoin USD and the Nasdaq NDX, what we have on the screen, in a period of 20, this is showing us whether Bitcoin is correlated or not. The closer to 1 means you're correlated. The below the 0.5, closer to 0, means there is no correlation. 0 is no correlation. 1 is perfect correlation. And so right now we're still above that 0.5 number, about 0.6. So this is telling us that there is some correlation. That may explain why Bitcoin is pretty much running flat, right? Momentum is pretty much gone after the big move. We're consolidating, which is no surprise. I said that before. The other tool that I use, the volatility mod, the Cryptonian volatility mod that I created, pretty much is showing that that move to the downside is over. But the purpose of this video is to draw your attention to the Nasdaq and Bitcoin and how they're correlated. Now lately, you see that there's a dip in correlation. There was a stronger correlation previous, and that's because the Nasdaq went up and Bitcoin has not. When we take a look at Bitcoin here, right? So we can see that during this time, as Bitcoin was going down here, there was a small correction in the Nasdaq, and then there was a correlation. And then that correlation started to reverse as the Nasdaq pumped again, but then Bitcoin didn't until news, and then it had a huge spike and just immediately sold that off. So what does this mean? Well, this means that we need to be careful. We need to be careful when we take a look at Bitcoin. We need to take a look at Bitcoin in the context of the Nasdaq market and also the S&P as well. When we put the S&P here, the SPX, then we can see that there is still a correlation very close to what we see with the Nasdaq. Now that correlation is coming down. Why would that be? I mean, because we're at 0.5, we're risking a non-correlation with the S&P. And that's because when we take a look at the SPX, look at the SPX. SPX has been doing the same thing as the Nasdaq, pushing up to previous highs, whereas Bitcoin has not. And that's why we have this decorrelation here, right? So, I mean, you can maybe argue that spike that we had a few days ago was kind of similar to what the market's been doing. I would say it may appear that way, but I would say no, and the reason for that is because Bitcoin pumped on news. That was grayscale news. Had that news not come out, probably would not have done anything. So we need to be aware of what the market is doing. And right now the S&P at resistance, the same as the Nasdaq. Nasdaq at resistance. What do you think is going to happen to Bitcoin if and when the S&P does this? Now the S&P may go sideways here, maybe, but still we're at resistance, and we're starting to see two red days here. What if the SPX reverses down to the previous fib level, below the 50, below the 30, gets rejected where it's at? Let's say it comes back down to test the 200. You know these things happen. You get a strong run, it moves up, and then it corrects, very often corrects down to the 200. What do you think is going to happen to Bitcoin? It's in my opinion that Bitcoin will probably be negatively affected. If it does not pull back and move lower with the SPX or with the NDX, the Nasdaq, then probably most definitely would remain flat, waiting for the next cycle of the S&P and the Nasdaq to push higher, and then it would move with them probably. This is kind of what I'm thinking. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We can see that the S&P is starting to run into resistance. We had a couple of red days, and you can see when that occurs, that usually leads into a pullback, right? That's usually what you see here. So the correlation is going down now. However, that correlation might move up if Bitcoin goes down with the SPX or the Nasdaq, right? And remember that this pattern looks very similar between SPX and Nasdaq both. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I think it's important to note that, important to be aware of that. Taking a look at the SPX, our volatility is 4. So that tells us that we have a move coming. And that move, statistically speaking, is probably going to be to the downside. So I think any big moves for Bitcoin this week, I think are probably probably not in the cards. I think we're going to consolidate, and and then after we consolidate for a while, we may have a move higher after SPX tries to do this or comes back down and bounces, something like that, and the Nasdaq as well. The Nasdaq, the NDX, you can see here. Whoops, sorry, that doesn't. That's the BDX, the NDX. There we go. Sorry about that. So you can see here that similarly, running into red day, beginning its red day, just like the SPX has a couple red days. So we need to be aware of what the Nasdaq, the S&P is doing, and also the Dixie, the dollar, right? When we take a look at Bitcoin and the Dixie here, if we put the Dixie, the DXY here, we can see that currently we're not correlated. And why is that? Well, that's because the Dixie is actually on a run. Bitcoin is not. Bitcoin was going the opposite way, down, and so there is a negative correlation. Usually when the Dixie is going up, that is a flight to safety. People are moving out of risk assets into the dollar. And so when we know this, there is less expectation of Bitcoin, and by default the rest of the market, there's less of an expectation of any significant move in a positive way, right? So right now the Dixie is hanging on to the 200, right? If it breaks out to the upside, you can see that it's been pretty much just going sideways here, right? In a consolidation range. It's now hanging on to the 200 moving average. So the question is, are we going to continue and go higher? If so, that's going to be tough for Bitcoin. That's going to be tough for crypto. Usually when the dollar's going up, that's a flight to safety, and then risk assets like Bitcoin and risky tech stocks, or not tech, but risky stocks, uh, and the stock market in general is considered, risk on. So I think we'll see more sideways action, more suppressed movements, more low volatility, maybe sideways consolidation. We'll have to wait and see how it all turns out. And I've kind of said this going into Q4, right? After the dollar's making its move, after the SPX and the Nasdaq they correct, then Bitcoin probably will get a reset with the rest of the market. And I don't think that's going to be until maybe later on in Q4 or maybe Q1 of next year. Okay? So I don't want to make this video too long. Just want to mention that you can see here Pyre up 5%, Pi up almost 3%, Luna Classic almost 5%, about 4.5%, Fetch AI 2%, and that's because Arweave 2%. That's because when Bitcoin is not doing much, then the traders get bored and they move to the altcoins. They have less liquidity. It's easier for the large players to move them and manipulate them and make profits, right? So be very careful. Be very careful. If the Nasdaq and the S&P start moving down and the dollar continues higher, that's going to put downward pressure on Bitcoin. And by default, like I said, the rest of the market, possibly we could collapse through this 24,900 level that I had mentioned before, this level here. We could quite possibly lose that. Now, the bright side of that is it would put us, and I think we're done with this tool. Let's get rid of that. That would put us right down here in the golden pocket, which that's really what I'm hoping for. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not anti-crypto. I'm not a bear. I am reading the charts. I'm going with the cycles. I'm going with the flow. And an entry at the golden pocket is much more desirable than an entry now, right? In my opinion, you want to get as many people to sell as possible. You want to enter the market when there's blood in the streets. Why? Because think of supply and demand. You want not even one person, and this is an exaggeration, but you want not even one person left to sell. That way you know the price and when you enter is stable and it's only going to go up from there, right? Now, yes, there's black swan events and there's all kinds of crazy things that happen. You really can't plan for that. Nobody knew the crisis, the pandemic of 2020 that would hit. And even then, Bitcoin was battle tested and actually did well. Yes, it dropped with everything else, but then it bounced back very strongly. And we went into a huge, huge run up to 69,000, 68 point whatever K. So keep that in mind. I'll end the video here. Just keep that in mind. I think it's prudent to be aware of the legacy markets, the stock market, the Dixie, the DXY, the dollar, because all of that has, now we're in a macroeconomic environment and we're not in a full-blown bull market. In a full-blown bull market, it's much easier. Now it's much more difficult because you have a lot of macroeconomics that are playing into Bitcoin's behavior, right? So now is the time for entering when Bitcoin is stable after significant drops, key levels, buying in over time, preparing for the next bull run. That's when you're really going to see your investment pay off, right? Other than that, the other option is a short-term trader day to day, which right now it's in favor of the bears. So if you're not really a bear, if you're not really a trader, then the day-to-day short-term stuff is not for you. Anyway, friends, I appreciate you watching. Thank you for your viewership. Please click like if you haven't done so already. It really helps the channel. I'm just starting this new channel. Had a channel before, but lost access to it. Now I'm starting over. So any likes that you can provide, they're free. Why not? That would help out a lot. If you haven't subscribed, if you're into crypto, if you like crypto, even though crypto is not really hot right now and we're going through a correction, it will be come next year. So if you're not educated about crypto, now would be a good time to start. Again, none of this is investment advice. I'm not a licensed financial advisor. I'm just sharing with you my strategies, my unique tools that I use for technical analysis, my experience. I'm bringing all that to the table to share with you because I really wish that I had someone to do that for me when I first started looking at crypto. Thank you for your time, friends. Take care. We'll see you in the next one.